the ended life crisis. Just trying to orient, and
Yeah.
I have a lot of experience in worked in a lot of, well, specifically design and education.
Okay.
I have a master's degree in that, and
Okay.
years of experience, but it's mostly freelance. And then I was working at a company in New Zealand and worked there 4 years, and then I've been navigating this job market space for 2 years now.
Oof. Yeah.
But it's kind of like I go into it and then I get
Yep.
to have the strategies, but I have contacted my network, but not the direct messages that are custom. I can do better
Getcha.
things, but it's kind of like, my question is, you see many people in like 2 years of that, where they have a gap of 2 years.
I would say it's more, right. So it's more common now, of course, I would say, than it was, say, 4 years ago. But yes, there are more and more folks that have gaps between working. That creates question marks for businesses. And this is kind of the part that is out of your control, right? Is that there's an assumption made that those breaks are your problem. And that they're not due to some other unforeseen circumstances. So I think there's a shift. This is my personal opinion. I feel like there's a shift happening and is already started, quite honestly, where that thought of you're supposed to have continuous employment. That's how that works. The thought of that is the tradition of that is no longer valuable. It's not seen in that way anymore. Not with the craziness of what the past 2-3 years for some people have experienced, right? And there's things that are outside of your control. You can't control the recruiter reading your information and or passing on it, or the hiring manager deciding there was one thing in your background that they were looking for that they didn't see, that they saw with someone else, and that's why they went ahead and moved forward, even though you can do that. But even the job description may not have been clear that that's what they were looking for, so you didn't even know to add it or to make it more prominent. So more and more things like that are happening. And more people are coming to that realization and understanding gaps are happening everywhere with everyone. Doesn't matter the background type, what you do. There might be industries that are more common. I would say design industry is probably up there in terms of churn and turn for folks in those fields. But I don't see that it's becoming a hindrance unless you don't have what they're looking for on paper. So that's why it's super important to pay attention. And I know you know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Super important to pay attention to the job description. But more importantly, it's even more impactful to be networking. So not just with your network and leveraging your network, meaning seeking out the networking opportunities that get you in front of those people. One of which is called the Job Seeker Garden Club, if you haven't heard of it. So they're a nonprofit that produce 3 meetings a month and then an additional meeting every quarter. And it's in various areas. It's in the kind of the heart of St. Louis, so that no matter where you're coming from, right? It's central. And the idea is to bring job seekers and recruiters and hiring managers and businesses together in one spot, all having the same conversation. We're hiring. Well, I'm looking. So it works out. Kind of conversation. So that's one. And that's not the only one. There's so many. But it's identifying where your network, there's a vein that works for you and your type of industry or where you're going. So it's just a matter of finding it too. Usually those are the kinds of networks that are really helpful to get you in front of people, or to talk about you when you're not there, right? So I'd be happy to talk more about it with you after if you'd like. See how I can help. I'm not sure what, but it's always worth a try. All right, so you're welcome. So I'm gonna go ahead and dive in. So I know that the posting was about job seeking and burnout, and we're definitely gonna get pointed with some of those topics today. But before I dive in, I do just want to say a couple of things. So if you came here looking to be fixed, right, or for something that fixes you, I'll save you some time. That's not what we're here for. There's a plethora of self-help out there, right, that can help a lot of folks. And if that's what you're seeking, we're in a library. I'm sure there's a section, right? We can help you find it, but I'm not talking about self-help today. This isn't a topic of where we're gonna, 6 ways to build your confidence or self-help hacks that you'll forget on your way home. What we're really talking today is about something that's far more human, far more personal, also very, very inconvenient. And we're talking about the part of us as people who get buried under our responsibilities, under expectations, especially the ones that are not our own. They get buried under routines. We find ourselves editing ourselves over time. And I'm going to start with some questions. Hopefully you guys can see that. Let me move this down here. Give me a sec, guys. There we go. Can you guys see that fully? Hopefully. All right. So some of these questions, they're interesting ones when you really sit there with them for a minute. But I found my way to these questions one day. And they really set me back. The kind of questions where you kind of go, oh, okay, I wasn't ready for that one. But when you sit with it for a bit, you really start to think about it. Most of us, we probably don't remember when we started editing ourselves. It just kind of happened slowly over time. And I would say that a lot of those edits that we make in our lives, they tend to leave a mark. And they shape how we show up, how we play small, how quickly we trade our edges to make other people comfortable. And these questions, they're meant to be a mirror and show you what you've been carrying that you may not have realized that you are. Now, before the wonderful world of adulting that we live in, we managed our energy differently, right? We didn't hold back laughter when things were funny. We asked questions when things didn't make sense. We were loud, curious, unfiltered little humans who ran around asking why the sky exists and telling you at full volume exactly what we think about dinosaurs. We didn't perform joy, we embodied it. But somewhere over time, we became this slow, what I call recalibration. It's kind of this old school learned behavior. And between childhood curiosity and surviving adulthood, we got the message that taking up space came with conditions. They were all conditional, right? And report cards turned into performance reviews. And curiosity got replaced with compliance. And bit by bit, we started translating our honesty into something that was more polite, instead of being honest and forthright and direct. We learned that intensity made people uncomfortable, and honesty made people feel like you were being confrontational. And even enthusiasm started to look unprofessional. And that's where the myth of too much happens. It's not from facts, it's really from feedback loops. And it's those feedback loops that reward the edited versions of us. right? So have you ever heard these things before? Too loud, too sensitive, too direct, too honest, too passionate, too much? Have you ever heard those terms used to describe you, perhaps, in the past? If you have, that's pretty typical, I believe, of what a lot of us have experienced, right? And over time, you don't just hear those words or those comments, you start to internalize. And when you start internalizing it, it starts to become kind of the script in your brain, right? Keep moving, keep adapting, smile more. Don't ask too many questions. And for goodness sake, don't make it weird, right? And sounds almost reasonable until you realize what it costs you. Because over time, it costs you yourself because you start editing, because that's what the room is asking of you. And there's no such thing as too much of something that's real. I think it's more about the discomfort of people who've forgotten what real actually feels like. And so we follow this script, right? We make sure our joy doesn't look like arrogance. We apologize for passion that feels too big. And we make sure all of those things, as they start to happen, and it's not just one moment, right? It happens slowly over time, kind of like erosion happens, where you decide it's safer to be liked than to be misunderstood. So we make those edits. But the myth of too much, it really only works if you believe it. And being too much is never really the problem. The problem is being surrounded by people that are committed to being less. It's almost funny how universal it is. You don't need a personality test to uncover this either. You just need a pulse. And anybody that's been within 30 seconds of workplace, relationships, PTA centric types of events and rooms and groups, you'll also understand that you've learned the art of editing and you've been part of those groups. And we just call it being an adult. It's the quietest disappearing act in the world. And what's crazy is you don't notice it while it's happening. You only notice it when you look up one day and you think, wow, I used to be more me than I am today. And if you've had that moment, welcome. You're in good company. And if you haven't, stick around. We might get there. Now, let's talk about this disappearing act I mentioned. So, as human beings, it is a natural thing for us to want to belong. But belonging you end up shaving off things at times to belong, to be accepted. And over time, we start to perform survival. And that's what that editing is doing. It's performing survival. And we perform it for so long that we start mistaking it for living. We build paper perfect lives. And we hit milestones, we collect titles, we call it stability, may even call it success. But beneath all of the achievements, it's a disappearing act that we've normalized. And trading authenticity for acceptance. Doesn't happen all at once. Again, there's no timestamp for when it starts. But it's one compromise here, when I'm fine there. But I'm fine. Hear the words, I'm fine, it's fine, everything's fine, right? Till one day we become so good at editing ourselves that we forget that's what we've been doing all along. The longer we do it, the more it becomes the default. And the worst part is that eventually we start thinking that's just who we are. We soften our tone so our opinions don't sting. Keep things light so no one calls us heavy. We stand off our edges. We tuck the loud parts in. We lean into professional. When what we're really doing is we're shrinking just enough to be likable without vanishing altogether. You might know this version of yourself that I'm talking about. It's the one that's built for efficiency, not expression. Maybe you're wearing it right now. and it's okay if you are. What's dangerous is when you forget you're wearing it. And what I've found along the way is that this is how we disappear. It's the meetings, the errands, the small talk, the caregiving, the calendar invites, all those other human things that we do to keep moving, but not really living. And what disappears isn't drive or passion. It's internal alignment with a frequency that makes you unmistakably you. Now, we're all born with this frequency. It's this rhythm that's distinctly ours. Shows it's how our energy moves. It's how we show up in the world. It's that frequency I call your muchness. Not sure if that's a term you've heard or used before, but muchness isn't about being loud or proving your worth. It's about something far deeper. It's an internal frequency of authenticity, and it's when who you are and how you show up are finally the same thing. So we're talking about burnout, right? That's a focus of today's conversation. We'll get there. But burnout happens not just from doing too much. It's doing too much for too long with so little of yourself. And that's how those edits start to come in. That's how that fade starts to happen. You don't just burn out, you fade and you become quiet. And that's what those edits do over time. And again, it's not about proving your worth. It's more about who you are and showing up as yourself and the authenticity of that. But see, authenticity is very scary when you put yourself out there. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know the response you're going to receive. So you just kind of hold it in because you don't want people to think you're weird. When really, it's your weirdness, the thing that makes you you, that is the authenticity that people want to see. But so rarely do we give it and show it. Because a lot of times we've learned over time that it's not acceptable. That's sad. But your muchness has never been too much. It's actually the most honest, whole, and human thing about all of us. It's your soul's real volume and not the polished for optics version. We don't lose it. Again, we quiet it. And it happens on purpose. Happens in Zoom calls and job interviews and boardrooms. And you don't even have to, go to work for this to occur. You don't have to be employed even to experience this, right? We'll find it in churches, church groups, and at home and at our dinner tables. We end up keeping secrets from ourselves so that we can avoid hard conversations. We minimize our grief to keep other people comfortable. We even start mistaking our silence for maturity. But we talk with honesty here. And what I think is most important to say is that what we're really doing is we're disappearing for acceptance, little by little and piece by piece, until the only version left is the one that's quote unquote allowed. And I know that version very, very well. I carried her for many, many years. Now, my muchness story isn't really special. In fact, it's quite painfully ordinary. The burnout that I've experienced in my past, again, it's very ordinary. But I think that's why this topic of discussion is incredibly important and why it matters, because I know I'm not the only person that's experienced it. The burnout I had wasn't loud. It wasn't even obvious. It was the kind that you carry with you everywhere. Answering emails, leading meetings, delivering results and work product that was at expectation levels, but also picked up dog food on the way home. And it was that kind of, I call it a polite burnout that hides in plain sight because you've mastered the art of appearing fine. We all talk about being fine, right? On paper, I was thriving. My calendar was this high wire act. My inbox rejuvenated like a monster in a horror story every day I came into work. And my title and everything sounded impressive, even past enough to show and seem successful. But somewhere along the way, the me that is me wasn't me anymore. And if someone asked how I was doing, I'd say, I'm fine. Because fine was predictable. Fine was safe. Fine is also the lie we tell when we've run out of language for what's actually true. An emotional white flag that just says, hey, please don't make me explain. I'm fine, right? We don't mean to live here at what I call the edge of fine. It just happens. You stay busy enough, distracted enough, responsible enough. You can build an entire life around not enough. You don't fall off the edge of fine. You drift into almost happy, almost present, almost yourself. Edge of fine's familiar, but if you stay there too long, it becomes a waiting room for your life. We talk about burnout like it's a crash, an explosion, or some dramatic event, but most of us don't just burn out, right? We fade out, like I was saying before. Slowly, quietly, sometimes even respectfully and politely. But I'll share this with you. Again, you don't just burn out from doing too much. You burn out from being too little of yourself for too long. Now, what we also tend to do is what I call toxic belonging. It's where we say what's safe instead of what's necessary. Has anybody ever been in a work environment where you sat there thinking, you want to say this, but you hold, you bite your tongue, you don't say whatever it is wants to come out of your mouth because you're not really sure the reception of what's gonna be shared or what's gonna be responded to after you say it. So instead, you edit what you say because you're trying to be nice. Right? So that toxic belonging is where we say what's safe instead of what's necessary. And it's all in the name of being one of us. You want to belong, right? Again, from a human perspective, that's what we want. That's what we seek is belonging. But that's also how our muchness fades. It's from learning that approval feels safer than our authenticity does. So muchness, as I shared before, it's your soul's real volume. Not performative, not polished, and it's not made for content. It's just presence. But here's a problem. Most of us didn't grow up in a world that celebrated that kind of presence, right? We found it to be safer to be liked than to be real, so we toned down our weirdness. We get very, very good at being beige. That's not any shade on the color beige. It's great for walls and flooring and rugs, just not people. And the real danger of beige isn't that it hides you, it quiets you. And bit by bit, your frequency gets buried under the static of fitting in. Now, here's the thing about the color beige. It is the safest color in the paint store, right? It's the color you pick when you don't want it to clash with anything else. And you don't want to commit to a color that you're not going to be able to change later, or that you have to change later. Beige is also, for anybody who's been in the corporate world, it is the corporate witness protection for your soul. Anybody been there? Where you, if you have, there's no worries or judgment to that. We've all had to do time there. But we've all seen it, right? It's at work, it's at home, at church, business groups, leadership meetings, and friend groups even. Sometimes we might even see it in the mirror. But nobody chooses beige on purpose. It happens the way erosion happens, slowly, subtly, and one compromise at a time, until you wake up and you're unrecognizable. Beige is a survival strategy, and it happens everywhere, especially at work, but it happens everywhere. And systems love beige people. Why? Because they don't ask questions. They keep the machine running. Smooth chaos while quietly disappearing. Beige isn't a personality, it's just the quiet death of one. The problem is you can't always tell when adapting turns into disappearing, though. Because a lot of times it's what we think we're doing, is we're editing ourselves because we're being adaptive. But there's a point when becoming adaptive is too much. And it's hard to discern. For example, has anyone here ever been praised for being easy to work with? As a question. Right? Okay. What about being promoted for being reliable? As another example. Okay. But on the flip side, you're included in conversations and asked to join the table as long as you keep your sharper truths at the door. Yeah. We've all been there. Fortunately, though, the longer you live there, the more you forget about your own frequency and what it sounds like. And beige offers the illusion of safety, but what it's really selling is invisibility. And that is how you get recruited into what I call the beige brigade. And you don't sign up. There isn't a membership. There's no cool secret handshake or anything like that. You just slowly, you start blending in, matching tone, matching energy, matching expectations. You find yourself in a room full of sameness. And until the idea of being fully yourself kind of feels like a gamble. To be clear, Beige Brigade, they're not villains. They're just people who've adapted because that's what strong souls do when survival feels safer than self-expression. Strong souls are also conditioned to survive, and that is why we adapt. But adaptation for progress is not the same as adaptation for belonging. One moves you forward, the other makes you disappear. And for anyone who's been living in shades of beige, beige was never meant to be a resting state. At some point, pretending to be safe becomes its own risk. And that tension that you might feel under all the noise, that's actually where my friend clarity comes in. We're going to talk a lot about clarity today. Clarity comes in uninvited, unwelcome, and unfortunately, right on time, like they always are. So, I mentioned clarity. So, it's not soft, it's not subtle, doesn't knock before it enters. It's that person, right, that just walks right in. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Not the calm, it's not the calm centered kind of clarity that they talk about on podcasts, by the way. We're talking about the wildly inconvenient kind. It doesn't whisper, it just disrupts. And it doesn't care about your 5-year plan, your full inbox. Just appears randomly, mid-meeting, mid-life, mid-lie, you keep to yourself and just flips the lights on. It's like wiping steam off of a mirror. You can finally start to see what's been there the entire time. This is why I call clarity my friend. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. And once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. It cuts through the noise and names what's real, especially the parts you've been trying not to look at. Clarity demands honesty because until you tell yourself the truth, you can't move toward it. Forgot to do those. So if clarity is the truth teller, discernment is your truth decoder. When clarity reveals the truth and discernment decides what's yours to carry, that's when the term congruence, which is when I was growing up, was a 50-cent word. I don't know about if anybody else here. It's one of those bigger words that was too hard to spell. But congruence naturally follows behind. So my friend Clarity has a way of pulling back the curtain on what you think you see versus what's actually there. You start to notice where people are out of sync with themselves. You hear static in conversations that used to sound normal. And you start to recognize performance in others because that's what you used to do too. That's really the origin of this discussion. Part of the Job Seeker Garden Club, and I'm an ambassador for the group. And as a nonprofit, I was asked to participate as an author in a book. Of course, I said yes. I had no idea what I was going to write. I mean, that's what overachieving, high performance people do, right? We say yes and we panic later. But I wrote a chapter on finding purpose, and it broke me open in the best damn way. It actually introduced me to my friend Clarity that I didn't have when I started writing it. Because writing that chapter, interestingly, allowed me to put into perspective things that I'd only felt in fragments. And during the course of that, just came to me this concept of what we're talking about here. And that I saw too many people out there that had a lack of that congruence and cohesiveness with themselves. I saw it every day. People trying to make connections and travel a path between what's fine and what's actually true. Now I want to break down that word congruence, which is the core of muchness. It's that felt sense of alignment between what you say, what you do, and who you actually are when no one's watching. Congruence isn't about perfection. It's about cohesion. It's when your internal compass isn't at war with your external performance. It's when your decisions feel like truth instead of transactions. And if something feels off, it usually is. A lot of times that's just your system saying, hi, I'm still here. Is this another shade of beige we're going to add to our swatch today? The longer you run on that kind of dissonance, the quieter you get. Most of us are used to ignoring that whisper or that knock that says, hey, something's off here. We're used to ignoring it. That's what really today's conversation is about. It's not about becoming someone new. It's just remembering who you were before all the edits, because those edits are not who you are. It's just how we survived. And congruence is the return to what's called self-authorship. And I'm not a clinician, to be clear, but self-authorship is this idea that you have control over your path and your direction. And you, as opposed to living through someone else's script that's been written for you, you choose to write your own. And that's where congruence comes in. It's when you stop living from the script someone else wrote for you and you start writing it yourself. So now the question comes, right? How do you tune back into this frequency I've been talking about? And I'm glad you asked. So what if you actually had a way to check in with that frequency? And we're talking about feelings and personal and things that are inside, but what if you actually had a way to check in with that and to notice when you've gone quiet or when you feel your presence is fading, and gently turn that dial back up to what feels more like you? It's an interesting thought. Unfortunately, though, that doesn't exist anywhere. I looked, not even on Amazon, but you can find pretty much anything there. Unless you count those, unless you count those choose your vibe quizzes on Instagram, right? Said nobody ever. So instead, I decided to create something that fit what I was looking for. And today we're gonna talk through some of that. So I don't want your eyes to roll in the back of your head when you read the word frameworks. I promise there's no weird pyramid or pop quiz that's going to come after this. This is just a way to help align what I'm talking about. Because from my perspective, I got really, really tired of vague advice, like just be yourself or find your why. Let me be clear. I really like Simon Sinek. His books are amazing. His TED Talks are awesome. Definitely watch them if you haven't. But it didn't actually help me understand what was going on and how to come out of that. Because anyone who's been part of burnout and has felt it, it's quicksand. And unless you have something helping you pull out, you're just going to keep going deeper, right? So I got tired of the vague, and I didn't need an inspirational quote from Pinterest either. I just wanted to find something that helped me understood this misalignment I was feeling. So what emerged from that are these frameworks you see here: soul volume and internal emotional equalizer, the 5 dials, and internal compass. And I don't want you to get so focused on the terms. It's really more what they do. And soul volume is how much of your muchness is living out loud, hence the volume. Your internal emotional equalizer, that's your IEQ, that's how you notice the state of your internal frequency. The 5 dials is how your presence is measured in real time. And the internal compass is how you find your next right direction when the world gets loud. And this isn't theory or therapy for that matter. It's just something I found that helped me make sense of what didn't. And self-awareness only gets you so far. At some point, you have to give your emotions somewhere to land. Structure that keeps you grounded enough to keep moving forward. And otherwise, it just lives rent-free in your brain, shows up later as mindfulness or something equally beige. But as a reminder, beige isn't balance, it's camouflage. And the truth is, awareness without structure is chaos. And clarity without action is just more noise. And that's where the framework comes in. It exists to bring some support to the change that must start internal. So let's dive in. So we talked about soul volume. We've all lived this moment, right? Someone's talking, you can't hear them. Lips are moving, but no sound. And it comes that familiar chorus, "You're muted. We can't hear you." Everyone unmutes and everybody laughs about it. Ha ha ha, right? The joys of virtual living. But somewhere along the way, that muting stopped being a technical glitch, and it actually started to become a survival skill. We learned how to talk without being heard, how to show up without being fully seen. And somewhere along the way, muting stopped being that technical glitch. We started believing it was just safer. And that's the real mute button. It's not Zoom and the default when you log in. It's actually our own mute button. Half the world is walking around on mute. They show up saying all the right things, but the dial is turned down on who they actually are. Does anybody else feel that, see that? Yeah. Muting or editing doesn't actually quiet the chaos, it just quiets you. And this is where that first framework comes in, is that concept of soul volume. It's just that lived experience. It's you being, when your soul volume is high, when things are turned up, you're very present in your life. You're congruent, you're audible, right? But when it's low, it's like you're technically functioning, but you're kind of emotionally and spiritually buffering. You're present in body, but maybe absent in truth. And it's not about being loud. It's how much of you that you bring to the room. Some of us live in that gap between muting and knowing. It's that space between who you are internally and how much of that truth actually makes it into the world. And that's why it matters. And you don't need to be loud. It's just stopping the disappearing in the process. So here's a question. How do you bring yourself back into full frequency? If you had a way to do that, where you can check on your internal frequency before you fade again. Like I said before, I couldn't find anything online, so I just created it. What you see in front of you here is my incredibly poor creative design approach to building a control panel, but you get the point. That's what the IEQ is. It's not a personality test. It's not a mindset hack. It's not a mood ring that tells you that your aura is cautiously optimistic lavender or anything like that, or doesn't tell you when Mercury is in retrograde and how you're going to feel tomorrow. It's just something that helps you recognize when one part of your muchness has gone quiet, or when it's overcompensating for something else. Think of it like a soundboard at a live show. When something's off in the soundboard, all you hear is that instrument. But when the soundboard is balanced, you don't just you hear one single note or one instrument, you just feel and hear the music. And that's what the IEQ, that's what these dials are about. And that's the heart. At the heart of it are these 5 dials. Each one represents a part of your internal frequency. That's your muchness. And they aren't personality traits or performance metrics. They're actually presence indicators. You can feel when they're turned up. You can definitely feel their absence when they're not. As you see the 5 here, it's joy, it's wonder, it's clarity, it's weird, and it's wit. And yes, those were chosen on purpose. And I'll explain. So joy, that's your capacity for connection. And it's the heartbeat of your muchness. When the world tries to, it's that the pulses through your chest when you feel seen, when you feel loved, when you feel accepted. It connects us to people and purpose and places and things that make us feel alive without performing. And your wonder is your curiosity. That's where when the world can try to make you numb, your wonder is what is the dial that keeps you tender and tuned in. This is the dial of awe and expansion and reminds us that there's always more. There's more color, more meaning, more possibility. Now, clarity, this one sharpens. It sees through fog, calls things what they are. It's your no with a backbone, and it's your yes with shape. Your weird is the way your body carries truth, resists conformity, or moves without apology. And this is the dial of unfiltered embodiment. It's why we move when we laugh. It's why we talk with our hands. It's why sometimes you make choices and decisions and you feel it in your bones. That's weird. And then wit. This one hits last and sometimes can hit the hardest. It's your edge, and it refuses to be beige, to be palatable. It's presence with perspective. And it's the quiet flicker of spirit that reminds us not to lose ourselves in the heaviness. Now, these are not chosen randomly. They are coordinates. Each one maps to a core part of what makes us human. Joy is your heart, wonder is your soul, clarity is your mind, weird is your body, and wit is your spirit. Together they form what is I call your internal compass. It's because awareness without motion is just observation. Muchness isn't meant to be still, it's meant to move. And that's actually where your compass comes in. I call it your true north-ish. You might ask why ish? Because true north for us as individuals, as human beings, your true north isn't actually a fixed point. It's more of a pull. It's a pull towards what makes you most you. And isn't necessarily pointing to the next big thing. It's just pointing back to the clearest version of yourself. And that's the practice of living by your ish. It's not perfection, it's orientation. It's the instinct that says, this is honest, this is me, and this is what matters, even when it doesn't make sense to anyone else. Living by your ish means you stop waiting for certainty to act. You start designing choices around congruence, not convenience. You start noticing what fuels you versus what flatlines you, and you start realizing that peace doesn't mean stillness, it means rhythm. Because when you live by your ish, you stop performing your life and you start being more present in it. And your dials are tuned into what's true, not to what's safe. That's when direction stops being something you search for and becomes something that you stand in. Now, before you head back into the world, just want to take a minute to pause and go through some of these questions. And then the part of you that hums when something's right and tightens when it's not, that's living by your ish, right? And it isn't about fixing anything. It's more about finding that frequency and that quiet pull towards what's most you. So again, what feels steady and alive lately? Where do I feel most like me? Which dials feel turned down today? What would happen if I nudged it back up? Or what does alignment feel like in my body, not just in my head? These are great ways to identify how you're feeling, what's going on today when it comes to living by your ish. Again, it doesn't yell, it's just a tug. And when you start paying attention to those tugs, you realize direction isn't out there waiting, it's been with you the whole time. And each dial is a way of checking your volume, that pulse check on how much of you is actually here. And when you start tuning in, you realize one of them usually hits first, and it doesn't necessarily nudge, it disrupts. You've already felt it in the room, that maybe that internal jolt, or perhaps a sharp inhale when I said something that made you sit up a little straighter. Oh, that's what that is, kind of response. But clarity doesn't ask permission and does not wait its turn. It walks in like it knows, because it does. Clarity is a pattern breaker. And it's the kind of gift, whether you realize it's one or not, is the kind of gift that shows up ready or not, right on time, and it wrecks your regularly scheduled program of avoidance and has zero patience for our beautifully rationalized excuses, right? It doesn't fix problems or erase fear, it just clears static. Now, my friend Clarity is a lot like grown-up elephant joke therapy. I'm sure you all know the joke, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? You don't download your way to change or transformation or enlightenment. You don't return to your muchness in one breakthrough either. It starts with one bite. One honest moment that breaks that pattern. And clarity doesn't hand you a 5-step plan. It hands you a fork. And it says, start here. And that's the work. It's one decision, it's one conversation, one truth at a time. And that's how the fog lifts, and that's where the return begins. As with most things that are attached to human feelings and emotions, I have some warnings and PSAs that I want to share with you in regards to a return to your muchness. Are you ready? Okay. I'm going to read this one verbatim because it's important. A return to muchness may cause sudden bursts of clarity, improved discernment reflexes, spontaneous boundary setting, allergic reactions to bullshit, and a magnetic presence that makes fragile egos itchy. Before mixing with chronic people-pleasing or toxic positivity, consult an adult-y or adult. Also, please note, muchness may cause you to rethink your definition of professional, outgrow a few expectations, possibly a few people, and finally learn how to spell congruence. If you feel a sudden urge to say what you actually mean in meetings or say no without explaining why, do not panic. That is finally a side effect worth keeping. All warnings listed above are indicators of your muchness resurfacing. Now, your side effects may include spontaneous hell no reactions to fake leadership and beige personalities, compulsive need to separate data from drama, and then emotional clarity that rearranges your priorities on a random Tuesday. Use as directed with heart, humor, and a balanced dose of clarity and discernment. Seek help if performative side effects continue and persist. Do not exceed recommended daily dose of self-awareness. Additionally, and hopefully there isn't anyone here who is upset by curse words. If you are, I apologize in advance. But this is what I call the anti-asshole policy. This is the part where people usually ask, so what? I should just say whatever I want and call it authenticity? That's not what we're talking about. Those folks that might say that or think that, they're confusing clarity with sound and volume and being loud. Being called too much usually says more about the other person's capacity than it does your character. Sometimes your intensity highlights where their avoidance lives. But sometimes you are too much. You are. Think of it not as an insult, it's more intelligence. It means your volume and your awareness aren't in sync. And that's where the policy comes in. Muchness is not a hall pass for bad behavior. And self-awareness is how you know the difference between expressing yourself and detonating your relationships in the name of authenticity. So return to muchness doesn't mean bulldozing people and calling it honesty. Doesn't mean refusing to evolve, because that's just how I am. If your natural frequency is superiority, manipulation, or making other people feel small, that is not muchness. That's a character flaw. Muchness is alignment. It's presence that fills a room without suffocating everyone else in it. You can't claim muchness by being the reason someone else loses theirs. So if your version of keeping it real makes people feel small, unsafe, or expendable, not being authentic. You're just being a bully and a jerk. And the world already has plenty of those. What we need are bold, grounded humans who lead heart whole and soul free, and who take up space without stealing it from others. And when in doubt, I have a filter to help you if there's a question. Interestingly, I work with leaders a lot, and I use this frequently when I'm working with leaders to help them recognize and understand. Sometimes you do need to shut your mouth. Keep it to yourself. It's not necessary to share or say, right? And I kind of use this filter as a way to help leaders understand what to say when you should and shouldn't, right? So the idea is if it's true and if it's kind, by all means, say it. Everybody needs true kindness, right? But if it's true and it's cruel, sit with it. Does it need to be said, or does it just feel good to say? Based on your response to that, I think you have your answer for what to do next, right? But if it's neither true nor kind, just shut your mouth and sit down. Nobody has time for that, and that doesn't help. It's one thing to have and offer constructive criticism and feedback, right? But it's another to do it to be cruel. And that's really a lot of what we're talking about here. I've worked with so many folks who see authenticity as a means and a reason to not be nice because, well, I'm just being authentic. I call bullshit on that. And in fact, it's part of, I think, what creates the world that we're in is this thought or this that people don't see or understand those rules, right? The bottom line is your muchness isn't about it's about being 100% real and authentic and owning the responsibility of that. Don't shrink to make others comfortable, but also don't mistake unchecked volume for power. I also have a mantra that I stick to on a pretty regular basis. And it is, do no harm, take no shit, be kind. It's really not that hard. Though I do find that there are times when it does, when it is difficult for folks. Now, not everyone dims their muchness by choice. Some of us are we're doing everything we can just to keep the lights on, metaphorically and technically, especially if the electric bill is due. But if your nervous system is always bracing, if your mind spirals or stalls, if you're managing anxiety and trauma and depression and grief and burnout, or anything that makes functioning feel like a full-time job. Today's discussion it's not about fixing or erasing what hurts. It's not a cure for exhaustion. It doesn't erase mental health struggles or untangled trauma. It's just a reminder that you're still in there, even if your frequency has been turned down for a while. If what we're talking about today stirs up something tender or sharp or something that feels too big, don't muscle it through it solo. Reach out, start where you are, and start with honesty. Needing help isn't failure. It's a side effect of being human. And we are not built to carry everything alone. So this permission slip you see here is to the current you from future you. You do not need to earn rest, joy, clarity, or tenderness. You're already worthy of it. So breathe, rage if you need to, but don't forget, you get to take up space without apologizing for the shape you make. Lastly, I want to focus on a quick discussion point. You will not be everyone's cup of anything. Some people want chamomile, others want jet fuel. You might be neither, but that does not discount or decide your worth as a person. You may not be liked by everyone, and that's okay. Universal likability isn't a badge of honor. In fact, there's a beautiful freedom that comes with accepting that with grace and honesty, truly. When you stop auditioning for acceptance, you start living in congruence, and you stop shape-shifting for safety, and you start showing up for real, like yourself and who you are. Even if someone doesn't like you, though, be kind anyway. Kindness isn't weakness. It's power. It's power that you give to someone else, especially the ones who need it. So I'm going to come to an end here. And to give a couple of things that once you've given yourself permission to move forward, the next step is really remembering. It's kind of becoming more in rhythm with yourself. And it's that moment you realize what you're doing isn't working anymore, not because it failed, but because you've just outgrown it. This isn't glamorous work. It's choosing truth over comfort, and it's laying boundaries like bricks, mixing that mortar with honesty and awareness and maybe a little bit of nerve. And truly, the return to muchness requires courage, just not the superhero kind, more the incredibly human kind. When you stop building for applause, you start building more for air and for oxygen. And that's the point where survival ends and our actual living starts to begin. Let me just go to this last one. So for any of you here thinking, do I even have muchness? You do. We all do. It's not reserved for the bold, the loud, or even the healed. It's not a reward. It doesn't discriminate. It's your frequency that you're born with, and it's still there. It's always been there. It's just waiting for you to tune back in. So take up your space. Say the things that need to be said. Lead like your clarity is contagious, because it is. And let your weirdo light shine so that all the other weirdos can find you. And keep your volume where it belongs, and keep your honesty inconvenient. Don't call it a comeback. It's more the sound of being finally tuned into your own frequency. And since I've been talking a lot about music, I'll just leave you with the last, which is the immortal words of Leonard Skinner, turn it up. That's the idea. That's it. Now, I do want to thank you. I do want to take a minute just to focus a little bit more, because those of you in the room that shared a lot of what you're experiencing from a burnout perspective is what we're talking about here going to fix that. It might, but it's something that takes time, and it's a choice. And I think that's what the return to muchness is really about. It's you making a choice, because it's a choice I had to make. And my own story, as I shared, is very ordinary. It's very typical for most people, but that's why this conversation matters. Because again, we find ourselves not just burning out, but fading out, not just because of doing too much. It's because we're doing too much with too little of ourselves. And so that's it. And I would love to help however I can for you folks, especially if you're in the job search world. I'd love to connect with you and connect you to the networks that I'm a part of. They may be very helpful in finding your next path or where you're going. But that's it. Do you have any questions?
What's the name of your book?
The Return to Muchness. Yeah. So all of what I've spoken here, what I've said here is a book that's in progress. So thanks for listening and thanks for being here. I appreciate it. All right. Job Seekers Garden Club. Yep. They have so are you on LinkedIn?
I am.
Okay. If we connect on LinkedIn, which let me bring up my LinkedIn for you. We connect there. Then I can actually share it with you. And that. But I'll connect you to the group and you'll be able to have access to all the events and where they're going. Are all free, of course. Especially for job seekers. There's a conference every year. If you're going to do that, I'm happy to connect. There's a career conference every year that brings together exactly the same job seekers, businesses that are hiring and recruiters. So that usually happens in March. So yeah, it's a great group. That's actually where I met Paul.
Yeah. So
it's the library also, to be clear, has amazing resources from a job seeker. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. But the library has so many resources for you as well from a job seeker perspective. And I would very much recommend you take advantage of those if you have not. Let me actually stop this here. Give me a sec, guys.
We got a program called Book a Librarian, where we can sit down with you one-on-one and show